Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it will help getting our show to others and help us get to our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Parade Deck, on Roku and Amazon Fire TV on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content, Going Deeper Within, on the Lions Guide Academy. Today, we are speaking with Loren Rosario-Maldonado. Loren is an executive leadership coach, award-winning author and speaker, and creator of The Edge and the Choice Framework, and she inspires high-achieving leaders to rediscover the part of themselves success made them forget. I love that. Loren, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Well, we're excited about getting to this topic, and I think that it's relevant to all leaders, the plateau, right? So we'll be speaking about breaking the plateau, elevate your leadership now. But before we get into that conversation, Loren, tell us a little bit about you.
I love to get into good trouble with good people. I just love, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, right? I love meeting good people who are doing good things in the world, sometimes to my detriment, because I can get lost in that connection. But like you said, I'm a leadership coach. I spent many years in global HR. I was the chief people officer for a large multinational. And before that, spent my time in different roles within corporate America in different industries: engineering, interior design, fintech, and what I learned was one thing. We all love and crave connection. But that connection means something different to everyone. We don't all connect the same. We connect in different ways. We may have similarities in how we approach it, but our perception of connection is different. And throughout my career, the reason why I do what I do is because I learned that in order for us to create that connection that others need from us as leaders, right? I was the head of HR, so I get a really good view of what this means within the organization, especially when it comes to leadership effectiveness and organizational culture. But what I learned was that you cannot humanly do that for someone else if you don't do it with yourself first. And along the way, I had all the accolades that you see glow on LinkedIn and on your CV, right? Yes, I'm an author. I'm now finishing my doctorate, and I graduated summa cum laude, and I led many different companies at the same time. I was, on the board before 30. Yet the disconnect was so profound that I didn't even know how to articulate it at the time. And when I discovered cultural intelligence, I realized this about all of us, is that we all really do crave this connection, but we don't know what that means for us because we have not connected with ourselves first. And it was so profound that I became, yes, borderline obsessed with this and educating others, and I talked to my family about it and those I worked with, because it is that important. And so that's why I love to get into good trouble, because I did the work to peel back the layers and understand what is Loren's edge, right? Connect to that so that I can help others do the same.
Well, I love that. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about a topic that I'm currently in that I'm passionate about because I've seen the result in me, and that's just well living in terms of how I eat, right? When you're passionate
Mm,
about something you're experiencing, kind of like what you just did, hey, you discovered the edge and you want to talk about elevating people, you just can't stop, right? So I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to create the Elevate coaching program, and how does it specifically serve high performing leaders that are listening right now?
great question. That came as a result of me living it. And this common, unspoken need to feel like you need to change who you are to elevate. This incessant need to, to strive, get more. When in reality, elevating is really about going within and understanding the core of what got you to where you are, which is forgotten along the way, right? Because we're so programmed to think, okay, I'm in this role. Okay, so I need to do this. Oh, yes, I have to work on executive presence. Oh, right, I have to work on public speaking because this is the rhetoric. This is what we hear. But the essence of what got us to where we are in that moment is what's going to help us go further. What we're doing is just refining that so that we elevate it. And that's what inspired me. It's moving from this tactical execution to strategic influence using what you already have.
Yeah, that's so sobering to hear when you think about all the things that we're fed along our route towards leadership, right? And we were talking earlier how leadership typically is not an encouraged thing in the Hispanic community. You
No.
you just are happy to have a job, work, have insurance, and get paid the 10th and the 15th, or however the sequence is for you,
Yes.
and provide for your family, right? And
Yes.
I never was encouraged to go towards leadership as a platform. I was just encouraged to be a good person and have a good job and provide for
Mm-hmm.
your family. So it's
With good
interesting to,
benefits.
yeah, and the benefits, obviously. But it's interesting to hear about the things that we just get plugged in. Hey, you got to go do this and you got to go do that. And we're spinning our wheels on trying to get to those places and then find out that all along the way we were separating ourselves, right? And so a lot of leaders that are listening and will listen have either experienced or will experience the plateau,
Yeah.
right? So many leaders experience plateaus in their careers. So, how
Mhm.
does your choice framework, and I'm interested in this, help them break through those barriers?
Great question. So it's based on 6 pillars that are, they're evidence-based. They are uh, not only heavily researched, but they are part of my um, of my doctorate work and the fellowship that I've done. And so it starts with courage. And we talk a lot about courage, right? But we often forget that courage starts by looking in the mirror. You need to understand, what is it about you that gives you that edge? And so that's the courage, right? Is you said it earlier, this sobering moment where you acknowledge all of you, not for the sake of fixing, because we don't need to be fixed, but for the sake of understanding how that shapes you, your perception, and your perception of the world around you. You can't get to humility, which is the second pillar, if you don't look in the mirror first, right? So understanding what your edge is, understanding what about you got you here, how is it all aligned, so that you can humble yourself to the reality that, hey, yes, this is your edge. But just because you have an edge doesn't mean you get an edge over everyone else. And that's where humility comes in. And it's rooted in cultural humility, understanding that there is no better than or less than. It's humbling yourself to the understanding that you will not and may not have all the answers ever. Then the O is for openness, being open to new experiences, right? We talk a lot about this in psychology, that the people who thrive the most and succeed the most are the ones that are most open, not fearless, open to new experiences. They're open to exploring and changing your ways if it suits you, right? Open to listening to different perspectives, not to agree, but for the sake of understanding. And the fifth or fourth pillar is integrating knowledge. We absorb a lot of information, but the ultimate success driver is turning that knowledge into action, right? I think it was Eric Partaker who said the other day that knowledge is no longer power, execution is. And so that's what this is about. It's using action to drive what you're learning into forward momentum. Curiosity about the world around you, curiosity about yourself. You know, we talk about the Latinos. I didn't know much about my Dominican culture until I took it upon myself to study my history, to understand my ancestry, and to understand that we are more than just tostones and queso frito and merengue, right? But this goes beyond your culture. Curiosity about different perspectives, about your team, about your own leadership practice. What has expired? What do I need to infuse? How is this shaping me and the world around me? Am I having the impact that I say I want to have? Or are those just words that I like to say to myself because I see it on LinkedIn all the time, right? And last but not least is empathy. We talk a lot about empathy. You search empathy and you get over 1 million views. But we cannot be empathetic with others if we're not empathetic with ourselves. To give ourselves the grace to acknowledge all parts of us and acknowledge that we are here to do better, be better, and give ourselves the space to do that before we can do so with others. And so empathy on both sides, for ourselves and for others. And so through this framework, we uncover the edge to help people understand the different levers they need to pull to get unstuck, to move away from focusing so much on productivity and focus more on cultivating purpose, which by default leads to results in productivity.
Yeah, that's a powerful framework. And I love that you are addressing the inner work that is needed in order for people to do outer work effectively. And a lot of times we try to do the outer work without dealing with the inner need. And what we get may be tangible results, but they're not impactful. They're not long lasting, right? They're just a band aid to the situation because you can't support it internally, right? You'll do a
Correct.
job and be satisfied and let it go, but then it'll fade out. And so we were talking about relevancy, right? The
Mm-hmm.
relevancy of a leader is really where the power is to continue to do the work of leadership. And so I love this framework. Thank you for sharing it with us. I am sure that it's going to come up for the listeners. That's something to pinpoint in the comments. So we're going to highlight that for sure. Now, along with plateaus, which is a hindrance for leaders at times, right? Sometimes you have to plateau in order for you to be able to continue forward, right? And that's
Yes.
okay. But what are some common roadblocks you see, even in the most accomplished executives, because they all face them? And
Mm.
how do you help them navigate those in real time?
The number one roadblock I would say is a lack of connection, because they've pursued and pursued and pursued so much that they lose that connection with themselves and others, and so that leads to isolation, right? Because they have this misconception that you can't be vulnerable at the top. And it leads into this over identification with what you're doing, and you lose sight of why. And that leads then to micromanaging. So the roadblock always begins with that lack of connection, and it happens slowly, right? It's almost like death by 1,000 disconnects, because it starts slowly, but because you're in achievement mode, right? You're in high performance mode. Oh, okay, that doesn't need my time right now, right? I'm focusing on the numbers, I'm focusing on growth, I'm focusing on this, and so it builds over time. And what happens is that it consumes you, and you don't realize until the damage is done. Suddenly, you feel isolated, and it borderlines into mental health issues. And mental health does not need to be clinical. It can be dissatisfaction, right? It can mean this disconnect from yourself and others, so where you no longer enjoy the time with your family or with your friends. Your mind is elsewhere, but when you're at work, your mind is elsewhere. You can't connect with your team, and you can't help them connect or engage. So these are some of the roadblocks, and I would go as far as to say it's an invisible thread that connects the majority of high achievers, right? And because oddly enough, we are in this hyper connected world today, yet the lack of connection is astounding.
Yes, and I see that most times a lot of executives will toot or quote this. It's lonely at the top.
It's lonely at the top. And so this is why the framework, is focused on micro habits, not another certification, another whatever, qué sé yo, 6 week intensive 8 hour. No, no. It is a series of micro habits that you build throughout our work together in order for you to reconnect with you again. Because you already have the technical expertise. You're already at the top. You're already the subject matter expert of your craft. The connection or lack thereof comes from losing sight of that edge that got you there in the first place.
Yeah, I've always told folks if people and your connection to people got you where you are, what makes you think that you, if you disconnect, will keep you there? It's just like, come on, folks. We
Exactly.
and but we do live in a highly connected world because of digital,
Mm.
but a disconnected world as humanity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you connect on digital only and cannot connect on the playing field of being a human being, you're truly living a alter life.
Yes.
It's an
It's like
alter
an
life.
alternate reality. Yes, yes, yes.
So
Exactly.
very powerful to mention that. And I hope that those listening, if you can reflect even a little of how your day to day goes, that you can find your place in that, because it's very important to understand in terms of relevance and being able to be effective as a leader. You have to be connected humanly. It has to be that way. And if you are living a life as a leader and you're just connected digitally, that could go away real easy. And it has gone away real easy. So, something to consider there. And thank you for that. Now, we had mentioned, or you did, executive presence earlier on, right? As one of those things that we're always looking for, and how to speak and how to do this. And executive presence is often mentioned but rarely defined.
Mm.
So, how do you help leaders refine it in a practical and measurable way?
I help them focus less on executive presence and more on impact. Understanding your edge means understanding what is that voice that makes you you, Enrique, or me, Loren. Be clear on that voice and understand how that voice then gives you the confidence to speak it consistently, because it's all about alignment. And what happens with executive presence is that it is a term that A is very broad, B is very subjective. What is executive presence to me may not mean the same thing to you, right? And this was even as I was growing up as a leader, well, I say growing up because I'm like 100 years old, I remember thinking, you know, I heard executive presence, I want to say, I'm going to date myself, like 18 years ago for the first time. And this boss was just insistent on using this word all the time. Mind you, everyone in the company preferred to come to me instead of her. And the feedback on my reviews or check-ins was always, well, you have to work on your executive presence, and you have to work on your. And I kept thinking, what exactly does she mean by executive presence? Because according to the definition, I pretty much had executive presence without the title, by the way. And so I asked her one day, right? Curiosity. I asked her one day, you always mention executive presence. And I'm confused because I think that executive presence is about the impact that I'm having with those around me in the organization, right? That I can speak well, that my message is connecting with the person I'm speaking to, regardless of the level. That when I walk away, their needs, their questions have been addressed and answered. So talk to me, explain this to me. What do you mean by executive presence? The first response was, what do you mean? And I said, right, because you're always telling me that I need to have executive presence, that I need to work on, emphasis on work on executive presence. And she's like, well, you have to be connected with people. You have to, you have to be able to talk to people. Right. Do you have some examples? Because I feel like I am developing very good executive presence, but there seems to be a gap. But she could not give me not one example.
Because she didn't know the
Because
what
she
it meant.
didn't know. So I explained this because we lean on these terms for the sake of trending. But when it comes to development and when it comes to impact, you really have to understand what is it about you that is going to leave people in the room remembering you. And that goes back to your edge, to be clear on what that is, right? To be clear what value it adds, but also what value it doesn't add. You need to understand both sides. And then create the skills to use it strategically. That's really what I help leaders understand and build. Not more trending phrases, okay, or trending topics. There's nothing trending here but you. To help you be the trending topic. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I love that. Now, leaders are listening and they're like, hey, I love everything Lauren is talking about. And but there are some that make high stakes decisions under pressure, right? And typically that's at the very top. So what strategies from your coaching program have proven most effective for those individuals?
There's two strategies that I use all the time. One is the 3-2-1 method. And it's, three mindset shifts that you use to reframe the situation. Because if you don't, yes, you can look in the mirror and understand, but if you don't work on your mindset, you're not going to go anywhere. And then I use what I call two activation techniques to help them take immediate and aligned action and then build on that over time. And one daily practice. This is to build, right? To build the habit of making decisions with confidence. And then we build on this with a 2-minute daily check-in. And so it's 2 minutes because who has 5 minutes anymore, right? But it starts with asking yourself first, what decision would I make if I weren't afraid of the backlash or failure or judgment, or, my boss assuming that I mean one thing and it said another, right? Humility, asking yourself and asking others for feedback on what you're missing. What could you tighten up? right? We need to take perspective, and you don't have to spend an hour doing so. When I realized that we tend to put a higher value on loud wisdom or being loud in general, but I've learned that wisdom really is quiet, that it comes in those moments where they are the most silent. So you need humility to tap into this. Openness, right? What outcomes am I too attached to? Where do I need to cut the cord so that I can be open to new perspectives? This helps with this my way or the highway type mentality, or I know all the answers, and so I'm the one that has to figure it out. No, people with open minds tend to see that everyone has something of value to add, especially when we're under pressure. We tend to become so myopic that we forget that there are other perspectives around us. Integrating that knowledge. Okay, this is what I know. How am I going to take action now? Is it aligned with my values, with the strategy, with the bigger picture? What one action am I going to take based on this? Curiosity. What assumption do I need to challenge here, myself and others, so that I can move forward? And empathy, giving myself the space to think about how I can lead with strength and care. And how can I help my team feel that, right? This is not to be confused with accountability. Just because you care doesn't mean you don't hold people accountable. You just do so with care. And you need to give yourself the empathy to do that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I was thinking it's normally we say as easy as 1, 2, 3. This is as easy as 3, 2, 1. So thank you for sharing that. I know that a lot of leaders will probably take note of themselves and self inventory using that 3, 2, 1 method. And I thank you for sharing that. Now, I know that you are working on your PhD, so you're a busy person as it is, and you also do other things. So, what do you have coming up, and where can the viewer or the listener follow you and support you?
You can definitely support me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. You can go to lorenrosario.com. All my information is there. The access to the Elevate, the Choice Elevate program is there. I'm focusing more on listening to all of you to create more accessible tools that people need to develop. I'm very vested in making sure that my coaching is accessible to everyone. In the end, I want to help, 5 million people in 5 years lead with choice. And to do that, I want to make sure that everyone has access to this, that no one should be limited because of a lack of resources. And so that's what I'm working on and where you can find more information.
Well, folks, thank you for listening. And Lori, thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us today. I want to caveat today's conversation. If you are able to get in the comments, number one, subscribe to the channel. And then in the comments, please let me know what choice was. And we will make sure that you get with Loren, and there will be a ebook that she will be able to provide for you concerning today's topic. And thank you, Loren, for making that available. Folks, today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, the Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. If you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. And tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.